We are continuing our review, our summary of our study of the Olivet Discourse. And I want to bring together the last couple of video subjects. That is the preaching of the gospel into all the world, then comes the end, Matthew 24:14, with the doctrine of the abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation. Now remember, these were to be signs of the end, the coming of the Lord, the resurrection, the end of the age, etc., etc. In a passage that I didn't discuss in our recent discussion of the Great Commission, but which I touched on in the discussion of the abomination of desolation and Great Tribulation. Here's what I said on the Great Tribulation. Revelation chapter 7, verse 14, John saw 144,000 out of the 12 tribes of Israel. According to Revelation 7:14, they came out of the Great Tribulation. And remember, John was in the Great Tribulation during the time of the Great Tribulation. Revelation chapter 1 and verse 9. Those 144,000 were specifically said to be the first fruits of those redeemed to God from man. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, that means they're the first generation of Christians. By the way, I didn't mention in that video, so let me mention it now. I've written a book entitled Blast from the Past, The Truth About Armageddon, because Armageddon, you see, abomination of desolation, Great Tribulation, they all go hand in hand. They're like Siamese twins that cannot be divided. So you really honestly have to catch the power of the fact that in Revelation chapter 14, verse 2, the 144,000 who experienced the Great Tribulation, who at least came through it, were first generation Jewish Christians. So critically important. And you know, I've never seen anyone essay that. I've never seen anyone point it out. Now, there are some commentaries who hint at it, who point in that direction, but I'm not aware of any who essay it as I do in my book, Blast from the Past, The Truth About Armageddon. But here's where I want to bring all of this together, all right? I want to bring it together by pointing out that in Revelation chapter 14, verse 6, John said he saw a great angel flying through the heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to every nation, kindred, tongue, tribe, and people. What was the message of the great angel? The message was, Babylon is fallen, Babylon is fallen. The hour of her judgment has come. What happens at the time of the judgment of Babylon? The coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven, and the harvest. Now, folks, I don't have to tell you, these are all constituent elements of eschatology. You can't have eschatology without the coming of the Son of Man. You can't have eschatology without the time of the harvest. And yet, here's what's absolutely true. The time of the harvest is the time of the harvest of the people and the land, and the breadth and the width of that land is 1,500 furlongs. Well, that's the size of Israel, the land of Israel. This is John's way of communicating this time of the harvest is the harvest of Israel, the harvest of the old covenant age, bringing it to a close, ushering in the everlasting kingdom of God. But notice the direct parallels between the Olivet Discourse and Revelation chapter 14. We have the time of the gathering of the elect, 144,000, the righteous remnant, in Matthew chapter 24, 29 to 31. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, they shall gather together the elect from the four winds of the heavens. Well, who are those 11? Those elect? They're the remnant of Israel. Again, this is the harvest of the old covenant age. It's not the harvest of the church at the end of the church age. That harvest prediction harkens directly back to Isaiah chapter 27, verse 13. At the sound of the great trumpet would sound, and the Lord would gather together the elect from the four winds. So here is Jesus predicting the time of the harvest and the end of the age at the sounding of the great trumpet, and he said it would be in his generation. By the way, that's the completion of Sukkot, the Feast of Harvest. So we have the harvest of the elect. Revelation chapter 14, we have the harvest of the elect, of the remnant, the righteous remnant. We have 144,000 out of the 12 tribes. Now that 144,000, I'm real sure, is not an absolutely mathematical, literal number. It is conveying a large number, and yet not a literal 144,000. So we have this imagery of Matthew chapter 24, the harvest, Revelation 14, the time of the harvest, for the gathering of the righteous remnant. Before that harvest takes place, or to herald that harvest, might be more accurate to say that, what do we have? The message going out into all of the world as a witness to all the nations, every nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe. Just like this gospel will be preached into all the world as a witness to the nations, then comes the end. What was the message? The message of Matthew chapter 24 was, this gospel, this gospel shall be preached in all the world as a witness to the nations. What gospel? The message of the fall of Jerusalem. And a lot of folks object to that, say, well, why would it be good news to the nations for Jerusalem to fall? Well, I wrote a book on this entitled The Gospel of Destruction, as I pointed out in a recent video. There are a multitude of reasons why the fall of Jerusalem was good news. First and foremost, probably, was the fact that Israel was no longer to be God's chosen people. National, ethnic, geopolitical, national Israel was no longer to be God's chosen people. Now, any person of any nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe is invited to be a child of God. So that's why that was the gospel of good news. Just like the fall of Babylon was the everlasting gospel. It was the gospel of good news that anyone of any nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe is invited. You see, there's a perfect parallel between Matthew chapter 24 and the preaching of the gospel into all the world. Then comes the end and the fall of Babylon. Well, who's Babylon? Well, in my recent debate with Anthony Aquino, he had told me in written form, Babylon of Revelation is Jerusalem. Well, when that backfired on him in the debate, he actually claimed, I never said Babylon was Jerusalem. Yes, he did. I have it in writing, email. So he changed his view right there in the debate. Tried to change his view. When that didn't work, he said, okay, I'll give that to you. I'll grant you that for argument's sake. Well, I don't care if you say it or grant it for, quote, argument's sake or not. Once you admit it, it's game over. Babylon was Jerusalem. So just like in Matthew 24, the gospel was the coming fall of Jerusalem. And in Revelation 14, the gospel was the impending fall of Babylon, i.e., Jerusalem. Now, how does that entail the abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation? Well, because Jesus said, as the gospel is being preached into all of the world, then comes the end, guess what would happen? The abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation. It's all at the same period of time. There is no temporal dichotomy between the preaching of the gospel into all the world, and then comes the end, and then sometime millennia later, we find the abomination and the Great Tribulation. Because after all, remember, John said, I am your brother in the kingdom and in the tribulation. So this preaching of the gospel to every kindred, nation, tongue, and tribe of Revelation 14 is set in that same context of the time of the judgment of Israel. Now, I pointed all of this out in our original study, but this is part of our summary. I just wanted to drive it home of how critically important it is to understand how Revelation absolutely confirms the doctrines of the completion of the world mission in the first century, confirms the abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation as occurring in the first century, since, to reiterate, the 144,000 came through the Great Tribulation, and the 144,000 were the first fruits of those redeemed to God from man. That's first century. And there's no way out of that. There's no escaping it. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Later this week, I'll announce another really, really great multi-book special probably, and you won't want to miss out. You'll save some significant money. In the meantime, thanks for joining me. I'll see you on the flip side.